Giving up the opportunity to defeat the government?
Well, it wouldn't be a defeat for the government, it's more like a defeat for the United Kingdom, because the EEA option, the Norway option, is, short of leaving without a deal, is the worst possible deal, because effectively we would become second-class members of the EU, where we have to accept all the rules, all the conditions, but with no votes and no say, and that would include accepting no change to freedom of movement.
But the amendment Keir Starmer is putting forward that you agree with calls for shared institutions and full access to the single market. In many ways, it's not that different, really, is it, to EEA membership? What's the sticking point for you?
Well, it actually deletes Lord Ali's amendment, which talks about joining the EEA. What it does talk about, which I do support, and actually the Labour position has been clear about this all along, is that we want to have as close a relationship to the single market as we can, that where it makes sense, like for example the European Aviation Safety Authority or the European Medicines Agency, that we should work with those institutions where it's in our interests. But Labour is very clear, the reason why we are not supporting membership of the single market is because we cannot accept that we will have no say over the issue of freedom of movement in the future. And that is the big sticking point here. And there are a majority of Labour MPs who recognise that the EEA Norway option is the worst option for the United Kingdom.
EEA membership does allow you a certain amount of freedom on migration policy.
Well, I'm pleased to inform Chris that I have looked closely at this. And the truth is that in 1994, when Norway had a vote and people chose not to join the EU, efforts were made to come up with some sort of answer. And for Liechtenstein, which has 37,000 people in its population, for Norway and Iceland, a total altogether of 6 million, an emergency break was allowed on immigration, and that was to deal particularly with Liechtenstein's situation, having a population of over 37,000. Now, it doesn't allow shaping on freedom of movement, and by that I mean the ability for us as a country to have a visa system that allows us to look at what parts of our economy it would be good to have more migrants in and other parts of our economy and sectors where that is not the case. It is an emergency break provision that is temporary and has never been utilised by any of those countries that I've mentioned, Norway, Iceland or Liechtenstein. It is not an answer to the concerns of the British public over freedom of movement, and it is not an answer to the concerns of the British public over being able to make the rules and where it suits our interests to work with our European partners in a strong way, but where it doesn't, we can go our own way. The EEA Norway option is the worst option because it doesn't allow us the ability to strike a bespoke deal that suits us but also a strong relation with the European Union. And I have to say, if Parliament this week supported the EEA option, well, quite frankly, the negotiations could be over in 5 minutes because Michel Barnier would bite the hand off the UK government to get that deal because they know that is the best deal for the EU and the worst deal for the UK.
Well, there would be many Labour voters would feel very let down if freedom of movement continued, surely, after they had voted to leave the European
Union. Caroline is starting to sound a little bit like Jacob Rees-Mogg with the sort of notion that we should almost go for Brexit at all costs.
No,
we have the opportunity here.
We have the opportunity, but we'll need to let Caroline respond to that.
The best possible option.
Well, I think when you're losing the argument, you go to desperate accusations. I think we are caught in a situation, Sarah, between, quite frankly, hardline Brexiteers and hardline Remainers, many of whom want to overturn the referendum result. They're using mechanisms, they're using language, which really is seeking to undermine the outcome of that referendum. I campaigned for Remain. I campaigned for Remain in what was a Leave seat. That's not an easy thing to do. I think the Remain campaign during the referendum made lots of mistakes because actually it was listening to some of the voices that we're currently hearing to support the EEA and overturn the referendum result.